Hi, everybody. Andrew Sheps here, and welcome to version 2.0 of the offset counter. I'm going to go ahead and just cover everything. So if you're already familiar with the original release, then some of this will be redundant, but I figured it's easier to do that than to just highlight the new stuff, because there's quite a bit of new stuff. So the most simple function of the counter is it mirrors the Pro Tools counter, and as I hit play, you'll see that it plays and it follows the scrub, just the same as the Pro Tools counter itself and the Pro Tools big counter. It also has the functionality to hide the busy digits, so in minutes and seconds, hide the milliseconds, and it will work in any format. It basically just shows you whatever is on the timecode display in Pro Tools. And by timecode, I mean counter. But minutes and seconds is one of the two time modes where special stuff can happen. So, as you can see, I'm at the beginning of a mix here in this session, which happens to be 32 seconds and a half. But what I can do is hit the zero counter button, and now this counter shows zero, even though the Pro Tools counter is 32,565. And this is incredibly useful when you have sent a mix out. As I do every single time I send a mix, if it doesn't start at the beginning of the session, you get an email back and they say, hey, at 1 minute in, there's something weird that happens. And if you don't have this offset, you would go here to the beginning and say, well, that's 32 seconds. Okay, so I need to go to 132. And you'd locate to 132 and you kind of find it. And then you say, all right, well, now I'm going to hit play and listen to that spot. Now it's actually 1 minute starting from the beginning of that mix. So I can watch this counter go, or I can locate using the scrub, things like that. There is also a locate button, which is sort of genius. You can type in the number relative to where you zeroed the counter. So if I type 1 here, it's going to take me to 1 minute, which happens to be 132,565. And this is also very forgiving. It's like typing into the Pro Tools counter itself. So I just entered 1 and we got 1 minute, 0 seconds, 0 milliseconds. If I want to go to 30 seconds, I can just type .30. And now there I am at .30, which again is 102,565. So the math is all taken care of for you, and the formatting of the number that you type in, all you have to do is remember it's minutes, seconds, milliseconds when you're in minutes and seconds mode. That's pretty much it for the basic offsetting of the counter. But one of the new features in 1.1 is I'm going to click on this minutes and seconds here, and it's going to switch to timecode. I can also zero the timecode counter. So if you're working in timecode and you want to have a temporary offset, you just click 0, just like you did in minutes and seconds, and now that point where your cursor was is at 0. And again, you can locate. Now remember, you've got hours at the front, so if you want to go to 30 seconds here, you go ... 30, and now I'm 30 seconds later than the 0 point, which happens to be at 2 minutes, 32 seconds. You saw one of the little hidden features. There are a lot of ways you can click on things. Clicking on the time base label will take you back and forth between minutes and seconds and time code. If you happen to be in a different time base, like bars and beats, for instance, which you can't re-zero because you can reset bar 1 anywhere you want in the timeline very quickly in Pro Tools. So that's not available within the offset counter. But you can't zero. But if you want to switch back to one of the time bases where you can, just click here. It'll take you back to minutes and seconds. Once you're in minutes and seconds, this will switch you back and forth. There are also explicit controls where command click will go to minutes and seconds no matter what format you're in. So let me go into timecode and I'll command click to minutes and seconds. And the same thing if I'm in samples, I can command click to minutes and seconds. And if you option click, you go to timecode. So no matter which format you're in, again, option click, go to timecode. So just a real quick way to switch the counter. And again, regular click will just toggle you between the two that you can actually offset in. Now, as you notice, these 0 points are different in the different counter modes. So in minutes and seconds, if I locate to 0, and then I switch to timecode, I'm actually 1 minute and 2 seconds and 4 frames before my 0 point. So you'll notice that timecode will actually display as negative numbers because this is a countdown. So it's a little bit different. If you can't actually have a negative timecode number, right? Before 0, you would wrap back to 23 hours, 59 minutes, 59 seconds, and however many frames just before you go to 0. But that's not really very useful when you're trying to use this offset to see durations around your 0 point. So this will display in negative numbers. This will also support every single frame rate that Pro Tools supports. When you first open the counter, here I'll open it up again for you, you'll notice that it very quickly opens up the session setup window. It reads the current frame rate. If you open up a session at a different frame rate, you just click the Get Session Frame Rate, and now it's updated for you. If you happen to switch to a drop frame, then the program is actually smart enough to switch for you. So if we go to 2997 drop, it notices that now you've got this semicolon, and it will switch back and forth for you. But if you switch from one non-drop to a different non-drop, or from a drop to a different drop, the counter doesn't know that you've done it. And what will happen is this counter will actually just get off from the counter in Pro Tools, and there might be some illegal values if you're running Pro Tools at a higher frame rate than the counter is expecting. So again, just click Get Session Frame Rate, and now you're in sync. That will also update the session offset. So if you change the session start time in timecode, Get Session Frame Rate will update that as well. That's pretty much it, except there's one button on the top, Enable Subcounter. This is brand new to version 1.1. So what this does when you're just working with one counter is it enables you to switch back and forth between the main and the subcounters. So you see in Pro Tools, we've got timecode and feet and frames, which I don't know how useful that is, but that could be what you want to do. And you can switch back and forth. Now, again, you notice the 0 counter button grays out a little bit when you're in feet and frames because you can't re-zero, but that's fine. So the other thing you can do is when you're in the subcounter, you can change the format. And it has the exact same keystrokes as the main counter, and you can switch back and forth. If you want to disable the subcounter, then if you option click that button on the top, it will disable it, and now you're back to just having your single counter. With one counter up, it's pretty cool to be able to switch back and forth. And again, these offsets are separate. So you could switch back and forth just by going to different time modes in the main counter. But that's a little more tedious if you want to do, let's say, minutes and seconds and bars and beats. Because bars and beats, there's no explicit way to get there from the counter. So you would have to come in here, switch to bars and beats, and then switch back here. If you enable the subcounter, then what we can do is set this one to bars and beats. And now, just by switching here, you can go back and forth between minutes and seconds and bars and beats. It gets even cooler if you open up one of the other surfaces. Now, the package comes with 5 copies of this particular surface. So they're just called the offset counter and then offset counter 2 through 5. I'm going to open up number 2 here. And notice it does check the frame rate every time you open up one of these. But I'm going to put this one on the sub and this one on the main, and both of them will update in real time, and I cannot show ticks on this one, and it doesn't affect this. So you can have 2 different timers running on the Mac at the same time. And this could be really useful if you're at a scoring session and you want to give bars and beats to the producers sitting down at the end of the desk with the score, but the scoring mixer wants to see timecode because they're making notes. You can very easily do that. Here's timecode, bars and beats. The timecode can be re-zeroed if you want. Bars and beats cannot, but it's obviously showing whatever is in the session. As well as the 5 counters that you get on the main Mac screen, there's also one that will run in the SoundFlow app for iOS or Android, which means you could have an iPad out on the conductor's music stand showing bars and beats while everyone in the control room is looking at timecode. So very cool. There is one other iteration of the counter, which is it's called the admin version. The counter up top is exactly the same. Buttons are in a couple different places. I've actually duplicated these buttons. That'll go away by the time this gets released. But what this adds is a list. So if you've seen this with the version 1.0, there's nothing really new except for the display toggle, which can show you the offsets in timecode or in minutes and seconds. And remember, it's not translating these. These are actually separate numbers. So you'll see song 1 rough mix has a timecode offset as well as a minutes and seconds offset, whereas the rest of these do not have timecode offsets associated with them. And if you recall, just double click to recall, both time frames actually change. Very cool. If you ever want to zero the offset, by the way, in case I didn't mention this, option click the 0, and that will reset it back to whatever is showing on the Pro Tools counter. So this list, basically, you just position, you just zero the counter wherever you want it zeroed. It doesn't matter where you're positioned when you save it to the list. Say add to list, and we'll call this SF webinar. Why not? And I'm going to hit return, and now that's saved. So if you want to recall, you just double click in the list, and it recalls both the minutes and seconds and the timecode offset. And it's pretty seamless. These will actually get saved for you automatically when you close and reopen the Surface. But if you're going to go work on another system, you can save and then reopen files. So you can just save it to disk. It defaults to wanting to save into your session folder. And then you just open from there. You can also clear the entire list. You can rename them once they're in the list, which is pretty easy. So call that 2. And you can delete individuals. When you open a list, it will actually add to the list or replace the list. And it will ask you if you have the same offset stored in the list as well as already being on the Surface. When you load it, it will skip it as a duplicate. The only thing that's left to explain, and I explained this very badly in the first video, which is why I wanted to do a new video here, is the manual offset. And I've actually changed the way the function works so it's much more intuitive. So basically, you place your cursor anywhere in the session, just like you would to zero the counter, but instead of zeroing, you can say manual, and now you can set that spot in the session to be whatever number you want. So let's say I want this to be 1 hour. I hit 1 in return. Now this spot in the session is 1 hour. If I want this spot in the session here to be 2 hours and let's see, 2 seconds and 14 frames. There you go. Now I can do the same thing in minutes and seconds. So if I get a mastering ref and this song starts at 37 minutes, 28 seconds, I can manually say this needs to be 37:28. Hit return. Now this is 37:28, and then I can locate from there. I think that's it.